Hello and welcome to this video with Wolfgang and myself, Simon Powers. We're very excited to present to you our work around the prerequisites of Agile transformation. Now, we all know that Agile transformation is extremely difficult. It's easy to understand, but very hard to do. And through our years of experience, we have come up with or worked on a whole bunch of prerequisites which really need to be covered before we start the main transformation work at any organization. And you can see those prerequisites in a big checklist that we've created, and we did a webinar on that, and you can download those. But today we really want to go into more depth, specifically around the part of the transformation, or the part of the prerequisites around the alignment on why. So to kind of get into this subject, Wolfgang has a fantastic metaphor for why this is so important, why the why is so important. So over to you, Wolfgang, with this awesome metaphor.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. I actually learned this from my son, who is pursuing his private pilot license. And he told me that, in order to get up on the air, it's really fundamentally important to have all the right things done at the startup of getting to the runway. So at the start line position, right, starting lineup, having done all your checks well, will tremendously increase your chances of gaining speed and then being able to accelerate and gain altitude as you want to take off. And if you think about that, getting ready for an agile transformation is about that. Making sure you have all the prerequisites really done well so that your chances of gaining speed and then going through this exercise of this journey over a longer period successfully is much higher. That's what we want to talk about.
Brilliant. Such a good metaphor, because there's so much planning, isn't there, that goes into that liftoff. And that's really what we need to make sure we've nailed. So we're going to talk about the alignment today. We need that alignment, and there's going to be some common challenges that we've both seen in organizations where that alignment isn't there. And then, of course, maybe people don't notice that at the beginning, but later on in the transformation, we go off a cliff, or in our own metaphor, the aircraft doesn't take off and we have to abort the takeoff. And that's very costly, expensive, and disappointing.
And sometimes dangerous.
And dangerous, of course, yeah. Exactly, for the organization's survival.
Right.
So in our checklist, we're not going to be going through the whole checklist today, because we want to keep the video fairly succinct and to the point. So you will be able to download the checklist, as I said before, to look at the other ones. And also, no doubt, Wolfgang and I will make more videos or run courses for you to learn more. We're also obviously happy to be invited into your organization to go through the prerequisites and help you achieve them. But for now, we're going to be looking at the first one, and we'll work our way down some of this list. So I think the first one that we were looking at was high-performing teams.
Yeah. So this is often the term agile and high-performing teams I've seen many times being confused. So is the focus on getting a team that is sustainably high performant? Is that more what we're looking after? Or is it about making everybody move a lot of times, right? And reassemble teams rather rapidly and then think this is agile? Well, actually the experience shows, and you can look at data that show then delivery performance indicators, that it takes a while until particularly an engineering team, but in general, a high-performing agile team is really formed and established. They know each other's strengths and maybe also weaknesses well to really get the very best capabilities developed and the best performance out of the team together. And if you keep reassembling and reshuffling the teams all the time, you will always keep going through this time of learning and establishing, and we'll have a hard time to really become a high-performing team and thus a high-performing organization.
Yeah, and it's one of the things which is one of the biggest impediments to actually progressing and delivering product is
Right.
we combine all these incredible people. We interview people as individuals. We combine them together into these teams, and not much thought goes in to the way that people see the world, the way that they express themselves. Are you a big picture person or a detailed person? Do you want to move ahead rapidly, or do you want to think about things first? All these different attributes that people have, when we put them into a team, often people clash.
Mhm.
And it takes time for people, the right people, to overcome these things and work out how that these differences can be a huge benefit to the team, so that these different viewpoints can gel together to create something amazing. And that takes time,
Mhm.
and it takes coaching, and it takes work. Now, some teams are lucky enough just to gel and go for it, in which case, awesome. The vast majority of teams don't. And so this kind of cohesion is why it takes time for teams to be together.
Right.
And,
Right.
and as Wolfgang says, breaking up teams, moving them around, short-lived teams doesn't create that environment.
No. And that is not to say it's wrong if every now and then maybe a new member enters the team and brings this new perspective, right? And maybe challenges the team. That might be quite the right thing to do. However, we're talking about whether the core of the team is established and then kept stable and evolved, as opposed to kind of pushing the reset button essentially on each and every team every other week, every other month. Then you will have a hard time to really get to this high performance state.
So we're looking at long-lived teams as a core principle of building high performance, which is what we're looking for in today's
Right.
complex society. So then later on, we can probably talk a little bit about if you are going to make long-lived teams, what teams should we be making? Do we want lots of handoffs between teams? But we'll come on to that later. So thinking about long-lived teams, and then we need to think about how we make up those teams. So that's our first checklist item as our kind of baseline kind of ideas that people need to have when we're thinking about transformation. So what's the next one?
Yeah, the next one is, is it what's the overall goal of the transformation? Is it essentially do more with less? So let's cut costs, and oh, by the way, to then achieve more, let's go agile. Well, that might be desirable. However, going into onto an agile journey and really establishing this new way of working does take time and effort. So there is essentially cost. There's an investment involved in establishing these capabilities, if you will, these organizational muscles, right? They have to be built and trained before they become effective and useful for the organization, before you can essentially reap the benefits, right, of this, or harvest the benefits of this investment. And so it's very important to be clear whether it is primarily a cost-saving measure that you're talking about, or whether you are investing into improving the system such that you get better outcomes, right? There's no sense in just overloading the system with more work and then require everybody to be agile.
Yeah.
No, that ain't gonna work. You will potentially, or often you will see rather initially, we need to slow down in order to be able to then speed up, right? And having that understanding that such a change is gonna going to create cost, at least for a transitionary time for the organization. Having that patience, having that willingness, right, to help the teams and the organization through this is critical for the success.
So important to realize that sometimes it's 2 steps back, 10 steps forwards. And that 2 steps back, often people get scared that things are getting worse to start with. If we think about some of the things within Lean was around efficiency, removing some of the waste. It was about getting a flow of value faster to the customer. And rather than thinking about cost savings, Agile really is looking at increase of value quicker. So rather than reducing costs, what we want to be doing is ramping up the value, which makes more profit. So when we're dealing with complexity, vast, rapidly changing, high volatile situations where we don't know how to get to our final outcome, we're experimenting as we go along, then that experimentation to get to that, to reorganize to realign the organization around that experimentation, as we say, it takes time, and it takes a lot of rethinking about our relationship to work and to each other, which means that there is a performance degradation before we go higher, and that's called the J curve. And the bottom of that J curve going down means, you know, we do need some patience there, and this needs to be, we need to understand this at the beginning. We can't just abort the mission halfway through, because we should expect that things are going to get a little bit worse before they get better.
Yes. It's very important to set that expectation correctly if you want to have a sustained agile journey and then see the improvements. Yeah. So what's the next item to consider?
So the next one on our list is around the customer focus. So if we look at the way organizations are at the moment, then often the customer is completely left out of the process. So many times we've gone into organizations and said, right, what's happening now? Let's start with where we are, and we'll have the process drawn out, or we'll be introduced to the people along the process, and the customers aren't included. Especially around software development, many times software developers never meet customers. They have no idea what the customers actually want and what value is being added. And so, especially when we have organizations where there's multiple silo or multiple groups of people working on things which are not customer focused, we lose sight of those outcomes. And when we need to get things out quickly, get feedback from customers so that we can alter course to reach the right business outcomes, then everybody needs to be visible of what's happening with the customer. So customer focus is one of the key cornerstones of agile development or agile organizations. So that's something we need to do, to include the customer and make sure the customer is able to respond at the cadence that we need to be able to have them responding. It's no good us being able to iterate really quickly on things if the customer is not interested or you're unable to talk to them, because then you won't get the feedback, and it doesn't matter how many iterations you do if you're not getting feedback. So another cornerstone.
Yes, and on that, I've seen often the difference or difficulties to really understand when we say focus on the customer, what is the ultimate goal, right? The goal here is that we have a sufficient amount of deep understanding of what the customer's situation or their business problem to solve really is, right? And then figuring out how is the value that we can bring that helps them overcome those problems, as opposed to just having, let's say, a checklist of, oh, how many people talked to a customer this week for how long? That may be helpful, but maybe not, right? What is really critical is that we understand, again, what is it the customer is struggling potentially with, and how can our solution, our service, our product help them sustainably overcome and solve that. And if we do this very well over a long time and delight them in helping them, then we can be reasonably sure that they will come back and buy more from us.
Yeah.
Right.
Which I often think is the success measure of a business. How much repeat business do you have? It's probably one of the key metrics that one may use to determine how successful somebody is.
And one other consideration that I've seen, from the what goes well, what maybe sometimes does not go so well, I'd be very careful to only use the word customer with really that, an external customer. Mm-hmm. You may have internal stakeholders that on the way, on the value chain towards the customer, have an interest in what you're producing, want to influence it, whatnot. That's all fine, and we'll talk about that at later stages. However, it's very important to be crystal clear. A customer is someone external to the company who is actually paying for obtaining our services or our products, our goods that we're producing.
Absolutely brilliant point. That is so often a misunderstanding within agile transformation or moving towards agility, is this idea that my customer is someone else in the organization. Absolutely not true. Your customer is your paying customer. That's very, very important. Brilliant.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next one.
Yeah. We briefly talked about the goals, right, of what do we want to accomplish, what's the current key problem space, for example, around, are we suffering that we're in our delivery not predictable, or is it more that we're suffering or having need to be more adaptable, to respond faster, for example, on changes with our customers in the market space, whatnot? Having clarity around what is really the key problem we want to solve, at least first, right, is, I think, paramount to really pull all in the same direction, as opposed to, oh, I want you to be predictable and at the same time be able to change on a dime, right? If an organization is starting to adopt the agile way of working, it will be awfully hard to achieve both of these goals at once.
I do think that there's probably two really big ones here, and this is the first major misunderstanding that I think many organizations go into transformation, and it is exactly as you say, it's around predictability. There are some problems, in software is included in this. In fact, there are many problems that we face now which are simply not predictable at the outset. And we're so used to our organizations dealing with predictable problems of last century, really. I mean, these problems have existed for the last 20 years, but we're still living in a world where we believe that the problems we face in our organizations are predictable in the long term. And our systems and our mindset is often geared up for expecting people to plan out stuff, do it, and get the result that they thought of at the beginning. And that is just simply not the case anymore. And Agile is really is a system. It's a way of thinking and processes which are designed around making the most out of non-predictable problems. Mm-hmm. And if we still think these problems are predictable, Agile just would not make sense, because it is geared for non-predictable problems. So that's the first mindset shift, really, that an organization and the leadership has to get their heads around. That how do we do financial reporting in a world that expects predictability, when your business is actually geared around delivering non-predictable products? Right. And that's something which leadership have to embrace. They have to be a translator and adapter for the marketplace, which likes stability, when you're delivering unpredictable products. And that's what Agile does. It allows you to create a stable business which is continually growing in profit in an unpredictable marketplace. Right. But if you still treat your product like it's predictable, you still treat software like it's predictable in the outset, then Agile won't make sense and your Agile transformation will fail.
Right. And you'll be disappointed. Yep. Yeah. So what's the next one?
I think around employee focus. So this is a very important space when we're dealing with unpredictability, when we're dealing with very competitive market spaces where we absolutely need innovation and collaboration among large groups of people. How do we expect to get collaboration and innovation if we have a internal culture which feels oppressive or toxic or unsafe? No one is going to want to speak out and give that crazy idea, which might just be the next Uber, if they're too scared, or they get shut down, or they're just so busy that they're unable to have the space to think. So employee focus is around creating an environment where people feel safe enough and have enough time to be able to really engage their brains to be able the problems at hand.
Right. And to help further illustrate or clarify this is neither the extreme of, oh, we'll just have a checkbox. How often did I have my one-on-one meetings with my staff? That may be interesting, but maybe not. on the other hand on the other side of the spectrum, this is not about, it's like a kumbaya for everybody can do whatever they please. That's not the idea either. It is about having this strong level of identification with your work, because you feel you are part of it, you're heard, your voice is heard, your ideas, as crazy as they may sound, be given a fair hearing. They might very well still be disagreed upon and not been taken forward, but at least you feel safe. It's an environment in which you feel safe to come up with the craziest idea with the most contradicting view of even your superior, and be able to bring it to the table, have a debate, either decide for it, maybe iterate. That's very often what happens. You'll iterate over it, and hopefully something even better comes out than you would have imagined or your boss would have imagined, right? And having that atmosphere, having that environment is critical. It's one of those things where I think I picked that up from you early on, where you said everybody's right to some extent, right? Mm. If you go in with that understanding, with that, should I say, degree of humbleness in your interaction, the chances of something better coming out are so much higher.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the really I talked earlier about these main pillars, and there were two that we mentioned. One was predictability. This is the second one, which is really around creating the safe space and an environment where people feel that they can contribute and want to contribute is really the absolute key to survive in this new world that we find ourselves in. And that's even more important now that we're at home, because so many of us now are working from our offices. We've got this tiny little window which you can see, and that's our view into the world, and that's how people see us. And it's very easy to be marginalized and not be able to talk when you've got a group call of, say, 10, 15 people, or even 7 people, and you've got a couple of big talkers who want to express their ideas very loudly. Other people often won't speak. And so creating an environment where that doesn't happen and this equal voice is really key.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And then maybe one last one is it's very important when you use the word agile and want to kind of like I've picked this up somewhere, this is interesting, now I want to join the choir, so to speak. Think again. Agile is, even though it's becoming mainstream or has become mainstream, and well, we as people that really work in the agile world quite a bit are obviously excited about that. But at the same time, I would make this disclaimer: don't go for agile because it's a fashion, or just for the optics of agile, right? So I can now put this on my company brochure, or I can tell my investors about, we've gone agile now, we're so much better. That's not what this is about. This is not about giving anybody a nicer picture. This is about profound changes, and it is about it's a new lens into your way of working, right? It doesn't solve any of your problems. However, it gives you an opportunity to understand your problems, your potential problems and deficiencies much earlier and much clearer, and actually find ways to address them much more effectively together, right? And that is another key part of, I would say, being right at this starting line position. If you have that understanding, all the more chances that you'll make it up in the air safely.
Yeah, and a side effect of this, if this is something that people are doing, is that people believe they can buy Agile in a box.
Oh yeah.
So Agile is not a product. You can't go out and buy a framework and install it. Now, there's plenty of frameworks for sale out there that you can use. There's plenty of things where you can download, everything from Spotify Model, Safe, Less. There's all these different frameworks, and they've all got fantastic things in them because they were made for specific organizations organically with experiments. And then they became a thing because they were successful. And then people tried to buy them and install them into their organization without doing any of the prerequisites or looking at their own culture, their own individuals, and their own products. So really, as a byproduct of this sort of thinking that, we need Agile, People then go and buy Agile off the shelf, install it as a product, install Agile maturity frameworks, which sort of guide how well you're getting along on the Agile journey. And all of that takes you down a path for failure. The only way that we can move forwards with this is to really look at the underlying business challenges that you have. Who have you got to work with these business challenges? How do we align them in an efficient way? And then how do we create the right safe environment for people to work together, collaborate together, innovate together to solve your business problems? And out of that comes your structure and how you organize yourselves. You can't just plonk the structure on top of something and expect that to somehow magically solve all your business problems and your psychological safety. It's never going to work. Right. So we have, yeah.
And on that, you will, as you go through that change, you will also have to inspect and adapt, right? You can't turn the organization into an agile organization in a waterfall kind of approach. That won't work. Right?
Agile transformation itself is an unpredictable problem, which means you can use Agile to solve Agile transformation, which is a fantastic recursive way of learning.
Yes, precisely. Mm-hmm.
So we've gone through some of the prerequisites and some of the cornerstones that we believe are absolutely essential to being able to start on your journey. So if any of this resonates with you, or it totally doesn't resonate with you and you're thinking, oh, I don't believe that, then that's a fantastic reason to have a look at the further prerequisites and try to get your head around the mindset which comes behind these, because both Wolfgang and I have done this many times, and really to look at some of this, the mindset ideas and some of the prerequisites that we've expressed here, especially if you don't resonate with these ideas, we really welcome you to go deeper into this, because we genuinely of our hearts don't want you to go down a 14-month expensive multi-million-pound transformation and fail because some of these ideas don't resonate. So please investigate more, and we've made the prerequisites downloadable for free.
Yeah. All right.
Well, thank you very much, Wolfgang, for this time together.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. Mm-hmm.
People.
Yeah,
good.
It's great.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks.